Well, I'm delighted to welcome Chris Robertshaw with us again. We're talking back to the Future IOM. You said this in the beginning when you announced the whole thing, that you wanted to break it down into three particular sections. And by the way, the first section got good interest, so there must be people that are interested in what you're doing and your group of people. I'll come back to that a bit later on.
Well, I think that perhaps rather than being interested in me, they're interested in the future of the Isle of Man. And I think the hit rate is sort of relates to the fact that there's a growing sense of concern about the future. So, all I'm trying to do is play my part.
Well, you wanted to break this down, and this is the perfect platform to do that on. There's three different sections you want to do on what your values are going to be, right? So where do you want to start?
Well, number one, just to remind those who perhaps didn't hear the first introductory element of Future IOM. Future IOM is not a political party at all. I am not standing. It's all about what needs to be done to make that next House, from 2026 onwards, much more effective for the people of the Isle of Man than has been the case over recent years, where we repeatedly have sort of become uncomfortable with each house as it progresses, always wishing the next house to be the one that sorts things out, and of course it never does. And the concept within Future IOM is that really this is about how government works, and that's broken or doesn't work well, shall we say. And there are three elements to this. As I discussed last week with you, one is the weakening democracy which we have. The second is that we're simply not living within our means. And the third thing is that there's a lack of strategy, high quality strategy emanating from government. And Future IOM wishes to identify those three and discuss each part. And then after that, what I'd like to do with you, Paul, if you're agreeable, is to go through how these three elements are all closely and intimately interrelated. So today, our weakening democracy. So the general election comes. People have to vote for one of the candidates. People do their best there, and we get the chosen 24 effectively. But we don't get out of that consolidated policy or a sense of purpose in terms of where we're going. And the reason for that is that over the years since the ministerial system has been introduced, the TIMWL itself has weakened, progressively weakened, and members arrive in the House of Keys with almost always with the very best of intentions, but very quickly get drowned out by the structure and organisation, the power and strength of the departments. And what you see out of that ultimately is almost a sense in the backbenches of, well, what's the point of what we're doing? We can't get change anyway, because the way the ministerial structures, the departmental structure works, is that it effectively crushes, not necessarily opposition, but alternative view. So that's really weak. And the second point is that we're now in a period internationally and nationally of real turbulence in all sorts of ways, which we touched on last week. And what we need is, and to some extent it responds to this research paper we discussed last week about how 60% of people feel they have no influence at all in which way our government's going, and another 30% who feel they've got very little. And it's a question of how you address that. Now, Future Isle of Man has come to the conclusion that the way we need to deal with this is introduce the influence of what you might call a rolling referenda system, so that periodically, perhaps a couple of times a year or so, issues which emerge, which are of real particular public interest, which may not have even been discussed at the last general election, because it may not have at that point even been pertinent or something that was on everybody's screen, as it were. We need to know, the Tynwald, the parliamentary process needs to know what people think, and therefore, as I've mentioned, that we've looked at the Swiss system of referenda. It's quite complex. What we need to do, in terms of Future Isle of Man's view, is that we need to introduce the referendum system to the Isle of Man on a very much simplified
because the Swiss do referendums on pretty well everything, it appears. Obviously it's not quite like that, but big items they always get to referendum on it, don't they? The people get their will.
Yeah, it is a democracy, and isn't that what it was supposed to be here? But we certainly aren't anymore. The situation did deteriorate once we moved away from the system we had prior to the ministerial system. So it's been degraded progressively, and thus we're arrived at a situation where there's so much disillusionment. But I certainly don't see the introduction of a referendum system as being something that should deal with everything. It's a question of what one chooses to apply the referendum to. Like
the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, would that, in your view, be a referendum item?
Yes, it would have been, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
in my opinion, but let's just address the issue of, well, how do you make the referendum system work?
Well, yeah.
There are those, for example, who would say, oh, well, Tynwald will decide whether there should be a referendum. Well, no, not necessarily. Because what Tynwald is doing, what the parliamentary and political process is doing at that moment, is saying, okay, we need to address this issue with the people to see what they think. And if Tynwald itself as a whole has the opportunity to say, no, we're not going to send this to a referendum, it might well be that the elements within government don't want the view of the people to be forthcoming. So that then poses the question, how do you do it? Well, this is where we arrive at the issue of what we have now, which is an extremely weak chief ministerial position. I mean, even the current chief minister has indicated to a degree his discomfort with the lack of authority that the current chief minister has, because he's touched on the point, has he not? I don't know how long ago, but fairly recently, about, well, you know, perhaps we need to think about a directly elected chief minister. Now, I think that we've shied away from that somewhat now, haven't we? But there needs to be some way of reinforcing the role of the chief minister. And my view, and the view of Future Isle of Man, is that what we need is a new specific role for the chief minister. So, like everybody else, he or she is elected through their constituency. Then they enjoy the confidence of the House of Keys, as it is now, to be appointed as chief minister. But after that, the power they have pretty well rests on a fairly limited scope of being able to appoint ministers and replace them. And what you progressively do is you work your way through
a very limited deck.
A very limited deck
of people, and you get to the point when the unemployable people are getting the.
Well,
you know,
you can say that. I
shouldn't have said that.
I can't possibly
but
comment.
If they were good, if they were on their list, they're the first ones in, aren't they? Then you get second division and third division. Let's try that.
Yes, but you don't necessarily, in terms of the big issues, you don't get a coherent focus on whatever ministers appointed to whatever role, because they arrive in that role as individuals, effectively.
And I should point out, some people didn't want to stand in that government, did they? I mean, they made it clear at the beginning they didn't want to be.
Well, we're not talking about specific government. We're talking about governments.
Yeah, well, what I'm talking about here, because at the end of the day, some people don't want to stand, but overall, he's got a very limited amount of people to pick from.
Yes, and he's got very limited powers. I mean, there's no two ways about that, and something needs to break here. So on the one hand, we have a population, the electorate, the voters, the people who have now expressed the view very clearly that they don't feel they can influence policy development. And we've got a weak chief minister in terms of his or her role. Put those two together. Future IOM is very much of the opinion that what we need to do is apply a new power to the role of Chief Minister, and that is for the Chief Minister to be able to intervene on any matter which he or she considers to be of serious import to the people of the Isle of Man, where, in his or her view, there needs to be a significant consultation and engagement. He or she then has the right to say, okay, Council of Ministers or Tynwald, whatever it is, I wish this to go to a referendum. Now, the Chief Minister mustn't overuse that, because it becomes, too much for people to deal with. I would say maybe 2, maybe 3 times a year it would be appropriate for the Chief Minister to pick items out and say, no, that goes to the electorate, in a very simple form.
It can be a very dangerous thing to do, though, can't it?
Why?
Even the 3-mile-an-hour speed limit, we're hearing all these people against it, but there could be this huge surge of actual people, maybe the elderly people that don't use social media, who actually are all for it, and you could get these things going through and going, well, we didn't think it was a good idea, but okay, maybe it is a good idea.
Well, hang on a second. You've just said there might be a majority in favour of the right. Well, then that's it, isn't it? It's applied, because that's what that's how a democracy works.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and if it transpires that there was a majority of the electorate in favour, and I mean seriously in favour or seriously against, because I just want to talk about. People will no doubt respond to that point as well. Look, we've got consultations. What are you on about? I mean, I get that. But the point is, consultations are devised by the department that wants to take a particular action. So there's a bias built into that. And we're seeing of late that the consultations appear to appear after the department itself has decided, well, we're going to do this, that and the other, which quite rightly upsets people. I think the consultation process was brought in good faith, for good reason, but we need to go that one step further now and say, okay, let's apply the concept of referenda. So, I mean, the Chief Minister could intervene in the Council of Ministers when something is developing, and he or she could then say, well, no, let's this go to referendum.
But don't people elect their MHK to do this for them? They're there, you vote them in, and then they are looking after your interests, and you may agree or you may not disagree, but the MHK themselves should have listened to their constituents and gathered where the wind is blowing on certain subjects, shouldn't they? And I'll take that on board. I'll
take the side now of those who say, well, our current system isn't working because we aren't able to definitively vote for a set of policies, which and therefore we need party politics. That's what that significant group of people rightly say, because you're not. Let's be blunt. When you're choosing your constituency MHK, you will be inclined to know where that, in very broad terms, where that person sits. You'll also should be clear of what that candidate wishes to see happen in terms of constituency matters. But neither the person electing that individual or that individual, once they get in, have got much influence at all on the power of the power the departments have now got. And there's no two ways about that. But if I can just address the issue of those who, quite understandably, frustrated with the current inadequacies, say we've got to have party politics. To them, I would say, I wish them well. There is no reason why a political party, for example, couldn't show an interest in what Future Isle of Man is doing, because Future Isle of Man is not concerned about policy, it's concerned about how the government works and how to make it work well. But the issue about party politics is the world we're living in now is moving on so quickly in so many different ways. It's going to be very difficult for a limited number of people who wish to form a political party to grasp all of this and to have fed into them high-level, strategic, high-quality thinking. So you don't necessarily want to go with a political party that is out with that sort of influence and opportunity for information. So, I wish those who wish to pursue specific policy agendas.
It's not a question of if there'll be a new party, I'm sure. I think it's a question of how many groups are forming out there at the minute that I'm hearing about. That we could be having a lot of parties, well, a few parties, then technically I suppose they should be merged and form a cohesive thing, but getting everyone to agree on subjects.
It's very difficult to get that level of agreement.
Yeah.
It's quite reasonable to assume it's quite possible for a limited number of people to adopt a set of policies on a limited range.
Well, better health service, better pensions, better whatever, but it's all going to be paid for at the end of the day again. That's another thing we have to take into account. Anyone can come up with great headlines, can't we?
Good pensions and a good health service, everybody signs up.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, everyone tick that box and go, yes, we'll vote for you. Then they realize they've got to work out how they're going to pay for it.
And you can't pay for it when you've got a government that's overspending, and you can't pay for it when you can't direct that to a result if you have little or no influence in the process. So the issue with a political party is that once it's set its position at day one, which is, shall we say, the general election day, the world could move on, and is moving on massively at a very considerable rate of knots. But the only vires that political party has got is on what it said when it actually stood for election. We need a progressive feedback to the electorate through a referendum system. So new issues emerge, unexpected perhaps issues emerge, or develop in importance perhaps not understood at the time the general election happened. And that's where in the world, as Future IOM sees it, is that's the point where if it's an issue of significance, that the Chief Minister might intervene, delay matters, apply a referendum and have that fed back. Now, there are those who are going to say, oh, well, is that in Switzerland referendum is statutory? I don't think we can go that far.
I was going to ask you that, because what mandate do you need for that to happen even?
Right. I don't believe at this stage that it would be the right step to go for statutory referendum. In other words, if the people vote this way, we must go that way. I think it should be an advisory vote at this stage to see in the next 5 years or so to see how the system beds in, because it will sort of take time to do that.
Could the current government have a referendum on the subject? I mean, is everything in place that can be done, or is it?
Most of it. There's a few tweaks required with the
some legislation needed.
There's a limited amount needed. Yes. But
so someone's got to take that through and get it through everybody. That's tricky in itself.
Well, that's Future IOM wishes candidates to seriously consider adding to their thinking the concept of interactive, progressive referendum over the 5-year period. That would completely dispense with this thing from the people, that we have no say in what's happening. And the fact that we're in that position now is worrying when we're entering a much more difficult period, certainly financially and in other ways as well. So the position of the Chief Minister would be his or her intervention would occur. Now, you might say, well, what right or control has the electorate got on how the Chief Minister intervenes? For example, he may not intervene when the general public wish to be able to express an opinion. Now, that's where there would be a fallback opportunity for, and this hasn't been thought through fully in terms of how many. There would have to be a mechanism whereby a given number of people would have to say, we want a referendum. Now, the Chief Minister, the Chief Minister's role in the use and application of referendum would change his role from being certainly remaining a constituency MHK, but it would raise him or her to the position of a specific responsibility to keep his or her thumb on the pulse of Isle of Man political life and be able to respond to that so that people could retain the confidence. If he or she refused to do that and didn't apply the referendum that were available to him or her, then the Chief Minister will know that he or she's diminishing his standing with the public. So then you come back to the question we just touched on there about being advisory rather than statutory. Yes, advisory, but by goodness me, wouldn't it carry weight in Keys and Tynwald if there was a public vote saying X, Y, Z?
Do you see it compulsory to vote in this
No.
things? No. So you're going to hard determine people who will vote, and people who are not that bothered won't maybe vote. Therefore, that will skew things slightly. But
well, you're saying the whole system's skewed now because there's 60% of people vote. Are you saying?
Well, yeah, the Australian system, well, they get fined if they don't vote in the general election. I mean, I don't know how far they take it.
One has. We've got a system of government here where we have 24 individuals elected, and that's historically been the position. And although it may well be that elements of political parties come into this, I think the system of applying referenda to that will enhance our system significantly, and could very well make us a structure and organisation of government that would be the envy of many.
Okay, well that's before we go though, just a bit more about Future IOM, because you are the only person we're talking to. We don't know who else is involved. Are you a one-man business on this thing with a few people just chirping in behind?
You've asked me this before.
I know, I'm asking again because it still doesn't add up for a lot of people that we're not finding out who's behind this operation, this organisation.
I am the
job to give you a hard time, don't you?
Indeed. I come to this, Paul, because I've consistently, from almost the moment, it took me a few weeks, being an MHK, particularly once I became a minister, to realise the way we were doing things was not good. And I have consistently maintained that position all the way through, that we do need elements of reform. They're long outstanding. I mean, how long have we heard, for example, that we need to cut our cloth in terms of government? It's not happening. How often do we hear things like from the Chief Minister, things like, DOI needs reform? It doesn't happen. Nothing's happening. The system is blundering on. So
answer my question.
I am. So I tried as a minister.
Yes.
And as I've said to you before, the ministers at the time simply did not want reform. They were very comfortable and they were complacent.
We've done that, yes.
Then I came back in as a backbencher trying to articulate change then. And this is my last effort. Bear with me, and I'm answering your question. This is my last effort to try to get those nuances of reform in the system which will make our government for the future a lot better. Perhaps the difference now between what was and what is there's more and more people now understand that we need a degree of reform, and it's those people who have come forward on issues like referendum and other areas who want to be part of this. And ultimately, Future Isle of Man is an appeal to government, to candidates, to embrace these issues that need urgent attention. Because, as I said in our introductory interview on this one, we're heading for real problems.
Yeah. Who is Future IOM?
Ideally, is
it you?
It's me fundamentally. Yes.
It is just you. You've got other people supporting you. But
yes, I am. Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, I have. I mean, over the last week, I've spoken to 5 different groups who are listening, who are on occasion criticising what I'm saying. It's not a question. It's not about me. It's about these. Bear with me, Paul. It's about these ideas inculcating themselves into the system, so there's an understanding that we must reform elements of the way we operate to make people feel fully involved in their democracy, to make sure that we run cost effectively and that we make sure that our strategic thinking is and actions are of the highest quality, because right now there are serious faults in all of those, regardless of how people come, what stance people take at the next election with regard to the things that are important to them. They can come in with the very best of ideas, but hit and crash against this monolith, this sort of bloated organisation that's being controlled and powered by departmental influence. And once by the time they get in, it'll almost be, if they don't understand these things, it'll be almost too late.
And how do people get in touch with you?
Well, they can.
If they've got input.
The Future IOM hasn't got an email address yet, but if people do want to contact me,
you have a website and all that stuff eventually.
Well, some people are finding my own personal phone number, so I'm happy to give that out and my email address, really, because I'm giving this a year and something to the next election, and then I need to sort of step back in the hope that we don't go. Please God, that we don't go into the next election with, well, we choose the right people at the next election and everything will be all right. It won't be unless we change the way government works. Okay. So my number is 494318 and my email address is Chris Robertshaw, it's all one word, all small case, @venture.co.im. I'll give you that again. Chris Robertshaw.
Put on the screen. That's right.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of people asking for this, by the way, so it has generated interest. I think it's just people want to know more, get more meat on the bones about what's going on.
So I hope they do, because this is so
what I hear about. Okay, just to finish off, just a bit of housekeeping. We did the 20 mile an hour speed limit thing. I asked if the minister would like to come on. I've heard nothing. Just to let you know that one. And other questions, as always, most welcome to us here. And this was under democracy. That's part one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So this is Future IOM democracy.
Yeah. Part two.
Next week is, if you're agreeable.
Yes, sure. I'd love to.
Yeah. Future Isle of Man. It's going to be departmental power. And then finally, future departmental power and cost controls. And finally, it's Future Isle of Man, high quality strategy or strategy.
And while you're here, we might just do something else.
And then finally, I'd like to do one with you to show how those three elements, that's improved democracy, much more efficient government, and high quality strategy, all linked together, particularly with this enhanced role for a chief minister.
Okay. And if there are anybody forming parties out there, I've heard a few, but if anyone wants to,
I've talked to a couple already.
Yeah, no, I'm waiting for the head above the parapet, so we can find out more about them, because it's good. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how many there are, and yet they're probably on the same sort of.
I think one of the frustrations those wishing to pursue policy, a frustration with me is that they can't necessarily see how just having a party with good policies is not enough. And God bless them, and I hope they succeed, but we must deal with how government works for the benefit of Parliament and the people in the future.